Hello and welcome to Talks. I'm Kimberley Dondo.
And I'm Tom Browne.
And in today's episode, we are joined by Jim Islam and Rowan Whittington. Yes. So thank you both for joining us today. But I think before we get started in the full meat of this conversation, could you give us a bit of background into yourselves? Jim?
Thank you, Kim, and hello, everyone. So I'm Jim Islam. I'm the CEO of the financial mutual OneFamily. OneFamily is an organization that actually is celebrating 50 years this year. We have 1.5 million customers, and all those customers are members of the mutual. So we are a customer-owned organization. Our origin is in children's savings. Mm-hmm. So we are the largest child trust fund provider, which means that every 1 out of 4 18-year-old since 2020 is our customer. Wow. But we also do life insurance under the Beagle Street brand, and we also have investment products such as lifetime ISAs and junior ISAs and ISAs.
Okay, great. And Rowan?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Rowan Whittington. I am Director of Product for Dynamic Planner, which is a advice tech platform working with more than 5,000 advisors through the UK. We work with more than 2 million customers over the years on kind of risk profiling, cash flows, all of your classic advice tools. But we also provide an engagement platform for end clients. And we work really closely with asset managers to make sure that our systems are built on a really intelligent and sensible asset framework. Mm-hmm. So Dynamic Planner has been going for more than 20 years. And I joined just shy of a year ago as Director of Product to focus on making sure that our systems and controls grow with the ever-changing environment that we have in the regulation and in the market, and that our tech keeps up with what people need from us. And advisors are knocking on our door asking us for more and more, and we're very pleased to provide it.
Okay, fantastic. So this conversation, which will be all around diversity and inclusion, such an easy topic to talk about, honestly, was inspired by a weekend essay that I'd written about a couple months ago, which was also inspired by the DEI initiatives in the US being scrapped, essentially. And I just wanted to kind of delve into how that might affect the diversity and inclusion initiatives in the UK, because quite a few companies in the UK have their parent companies based in the US, and whether that might have an effect. So I guess to start off this conversation, I wanted to ask you both what your thoughts are. Since the US has walked back its DEI initiatives, have you noticed a shift in perspective in the UK market at all?
I think so. I read your essay. I thought it was brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Obviously, we're all in the room for a reason. We care about diversity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. I really resonated with the idea that there were some people who went, oh, great, I don't have to do this anymore. Mm. And those people were already doing their initiatives as a tick box exercise. They were the wrong people for us to be asking to do that, because they didn't want to do it in the first place. But I've actually had some really positive conversations, not only at Dynamic Planner, but with some of our partners and with some of our asset managers about their almost doubling down on their initiatives and saying, no, this is actually important to us. We recognise that this has positive business output. Mm-hmm. We recognise that our staff value this. We recognise that this is important to the sustainability of our ecosystem and our industry, not just for the flowery, it feels nice, but also because there's genuine impact. So I think for those people who've taken the opportunity to opt out, mm-hmm. Great. Stop paying lip service. The cynic in me says, great, we don't want you. You're not. You didn't want to do it in the first place. You weren't doing a very good job. Mm-hmm. People who worked for you were feeling that it was disingenuous. Right. So actually, thank you for stopping lying about doing this. Yeah. But the ones who've kind of jumped at the opportunity to reiterate that, I think have been even stronger. And I think it's been a bit of a moment for the UK market to assert its own thoughts and its own opinions on D&I. And some new green shoots coming out of it, I think.
Okay. And Jim, your perspective on this, because I know it's something that you are passionate about, D&I. So,
absolutely. I think first of all, we just have to recognize the tremendous progress that's been made. I think it's so foundational now that I think things have progressed so much. I mean, if you look at a representation of women on boards, from a quarter 10 years ago to 45%, representation of ethnic minority. So we have minorities as well. So I think we have to recognize the great progress that's been made. Clearly, there's more that needs to be done.
Right.
But the benefits are so tangible that I don't think that organizations can just ignore it. Whether it is about understanding customer needs, whether it's about winning talent, whether it's about innovation, whether it's about motivation, all those elements, they are so well embedded in the organization. And I look at my own organization and the role that it plays in terms of delivering better service, but also how we think about things. That I just think that there is a momentum there which is going to take us forward.
Yeah.
And I don't think any sort of, obviously there will be some curveballs along the way, but there have always been. But I think it's important that we recognize that it is so critical, in particular when we look at Gen Z and millennials. I think when we are doing recruitment, and we've done our own research on this, and 80% of Gen Z and millennials, and there are no surprises there, they would look at purpose, values, culture as a key determinant of the organizations they want to join. So do we want to win talent? Do we want to be commercially successful? And if you want to do that, then there's no turning back here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's in a way, I don't, a part of me just doesn't understand the controversy. I mean, who would not be in favour of diversity and inclusion? And I think what Kim's essay sort of prompted in me a very good essay. I'll add to the praise. But it got me thinking, so how have we come to this point where there's been this kind of like, in certain quarters, attempted rollback on diversity and inclusion? And I think, I mean, on the one hand, you've got sort of malevolent actors like Trump, or other. I'll put my political cards on the table. who are I think sort of badly motivated and are weaponizing it as a sort of an issue to push back in general against sort of liberal values. But then I suppose there are another cohort who I don't know, through maybe miscommunication or misunderstanding, have got into a sort of bit of a defensive crouch around this issue. And I think that's really where, I'd like to see a change in the conversation, because I was chatting to Jim just off mic and sort of saying that it's got caught up in a sort of a broader culture war where it really didn't need to at all. And I think maybe part of it is around perception and language. I mean, you take an issue like a phrase like unconscious bias. And I think a lot of people, and they might be quite liberal-minded people, sort of interpret that as, oh, I'm accused of being a racist, but I don't realise it, type thing, which is not really what it means at all. It's basically saying it's more a preference bias. It's made that we all have, through our upbringings and our environments that we work in and grow up in, we all have preferences, whether we're aware of them or not. And it doesn't necessarily be malevolent or prejudicial, but we should recognise that we do have those preferences and do stuff to sort of like correct them. And I don't know. I sometimes wonder whether to sort of try and regain ground away from this kind of like D&I backlash, whether there's something more than we can do to open up those conversations to make it stop people having that sort of almost allergic reaction against it that you get in some quarters. I don't know how much that resonates with either of you.
None of us want to inherently recognise a privilege that we might have.
Yeah.
We all think that someone else has it better than us. So when it's being suggested to you that you might be in the position you're in because of privileges that you haven't acknowledged or you aren't aware of, the natural response is to be defensive, because people want to think, no, I worked hard and I got there. And obviously that's 95% of the time is what happened. But the flip side of that is I get people in my career still who, and very early in my career especially, I had people saying, you're only, the head of that or the lead of that or in this senior leadership group because you're a woman.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't possibly be experienced enough or smart enough or kind of academically gifted enough or data literate enough for you to be able to be in this room in your 20s. You must be a diversity hire. And if my response to them was, well, you couldn't possibly be any of those things, you must be here because you look like everybody else.
Yeah.
It creates a friction. And I would never respond like that. But it does create that friction. So I guess if you're, I recognize that I have a lot of privileges. I do have certain traits and things about me that often put me into a kind of marginalized groups. But there are people who have more of those or less of those, and I have to recognize my privilege, and that's really hard. But when you have at least one or two or three things where you can go, I resonate that has held me back, it is easier. It's easier to have that conversation. So when I was younger, I used to say, you can't be what you can't see. You can't want to become something if you don't know that there are other people doing that. And I flippantly used to think, that's really silly. But actually, if I look back over my career, the people who have really supported me and who have really inspired me have often been people like me. And it's the same in hiring practices. We inadvertently hire people like us because we like them, we get on with them, we relate to them, we think, they think like me, they're like me. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but in a professional environment, it can lead to rooms full of people who all think the same, or rooms full of people who all do the same thing. And I guess all that to say, Tom, I completely agree that people are defensive because they do feel like they're being told, well, you're only here because you're a white man. You couldn't possibly be good at your job because of that.
Yeah.
And so you naturally go, oh, it's not that. And I do it too. And we all have to be more open to the idea that it's not really about us. It's about the systems around us, and what the world that's been created around us. And it's been created by a lot of straight white men 150 or 200 years ago. Yeah. And we're still unpicking some of that, and especially in financial services. We're not completely behind. There are many industries who have worse D&I issues than financial services, but there are also many that have better. And I'm lucky to work in the kind of fintech space, so the financial services plus the tech. Yeah. And tech is one of the industries that has had a lot of progress, and I don't really know why that is. I think probably because is a relatively new industry, so it doesn't have the legacy of that. But also there have been some really deliberate D&I, get women into STEM, get people from marginalised backgrounds into STEM. Oh, this is a really good opportunity for neurodivergent brains because it works like this. I think tech has been quite an interesting flagship in seeing how it can work. So fintech is an interesting group to be in. Yeah. And I definitely made the choice when I moved to Dynamic Planner from a much more tech environment. I used to work for Confused.com. I moved to Dynamic Planner, and one of the only reasons I did it is because of our stats. I was like, look, 48% of women in the leadership team, 37% in the executive management team. 26% of people at Dynamic Planner come from a different country or are on work visas, working in different ways. We've got young people, we've got older people, we've got a mix of people. We've got 3% people, 6% of people who kind of identify as having disability. A percentage that I can't remember of kind of carers and people who are providing different support. And I genuinely, the only reason I looked at Dynamic Planner was because of the stats. And then I went and said, look at all of this other brilliant stuff. But the thing that got the recruiter to get me interested was kind of talking to me about the diversity of the company. And as you said, did you say 70 or 80% of young people, it's a choice?
Yeah, absolutely.
I won't work somewhere unless that's true. And I want it to be true. If I'd started and then thought, actually, this is not a diverse place, I would have jumped. So it actually, you do have to put your money where your mouth is and make it true rather than just ticking the box.
Yeah. I think I absolutely agree. I was talking to Tom about it. Is actually I don't see this polarization and this sort of debate that it's going on, because when we think about this, so this is one of the ways to look at it is that any company, or let's say a financial services organization, what is it that we are trying to do? So we have identified 5 key trends in the UK. That forms the basis of our strategy. So those trends we have identified: threat-based safety nets, so people having to take greater ownership of their financial security needs, social inclusion, lack of social mobility, working revolution, the advent of AI, for example, 100-year life, and climate change, right? Now, if you look at all these issues and look at some of the data underlying that, so social mobility, for example, and if you look at the advantages that, let's say, higher socioeconomic groups have against sort of lower socioeconomic groups, even within ethnic minorities, you have that. So there is that intersectionality. You look at gender pensions gap, women having almost 4 months less pension in retirement, right? You look at poverty premium, right? £430. What it means is that people with lower socioeconomic groups actually have to pay on average £430 for services that everybody gets at less than that. Now, on all those elements, there is an element of diversity and inclusion, right? And it cuts across a number of areas. Now, if you really want to respond to these challenges and the challenges that I've identified, that we look at it, we need to understand people's experiences. And we are only going to get that if we have representation from those sections of the population. And that is the strength of the diverse workforce. I've been involved throughout my career in many, many transformation projects, right? And they've involved technological transformation. The one lesson that I have learned always is that when it comes to tech transformation, the biggest challenge is not tech. The biggest challenge is culture and the unwillingness to change. And that is brought by groupthink. People from the same background, who can't see anything different. And that is why there's so much advantages for organization in this present day and age, where the environment around us is changing so fast that we need to be agile, and therefore we need to embrace it. So I don't sort of see that, need for having such strong views on either side. It's something that should be embraced. On unconscious bias, if I could just talk about my own personal story, because so I'm an immigrant, naturalized British citizen, and very proud. I think we should really embrace and be proud of the British values. Now, I grew up in Pakistan. So my experience was actually growing up in a country which was quite homogenous, right? So, I did not have what I would call a minority experience. Right. So when I moved to the UK, and I worked in a number of organizations, and I would say organizations I've worked for, I will call them meritocracies. I progressed in those organizations. I did really well. But I found that I would be the only ethnic minority in most meetings, and sometimes on the floor as well. I didn't question that initially. Because I didn't recognize it, right? But as I sort of carried on with my career and went to different organizations, I thought, hang on, these organizations are so different. Suddenly I find there are more people from different backgrounds. The floor looks very different. And this is, for me, I think it has been a journey of awareness as well, that, look, I think we need to be questioning these things. And representation is quite important. And I think giving voice to is important. So this is not about people doing something wrong willingly. It's just that, sometimes things happen because of historical reasons or whatever. We just need to be aware about that and learn from it. And there's no shame in learning, I think. And that's the reason why a word like unconscious bias shouldn't be given a negative sort of terminology. It's something that we just need to be aware of.
I don't understand why it has a negative connotation, because it's unconscious. You're not saying like you're harmfully and actively doing this thing. It's just based on media that you have watched or your background. You're more likely to trust this type of person, or I happen to go to the same university as this applicant. Therefore, I'm more leaning towards this applicant just because we have that in common. So these are just very little subtle things, but I think bringing it to the forefront of your mind might make you more active in the choices that you make. But I also wanted to ask, when it comes to certain D&I initiatives, is there a potential that some people at this point are feeling the fatigue? Something that I did mention in my essay as well, which to a certain extent, I could understand if I was, working in these groups within a company where I'm actively trying to do something. And maybe you have, like, you're talking about the group think and certain people being like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. And then not. So you're the only person who's actively pushing this thing, or you've been doing certain initiatives for years, but you're not really seeing the impactful change. Do you think that might be why some people at this point are just like, well, I give up, I've done my best?
People are fed up. People are fed up. I agree. Yes.
Just in general with everything.
People get tired, if you take financial advice, you're speaking to someone who's never had financial advice before, and you're trying to tell them, you're talking to someone who's 35, and you're saying you need to be saving money so that when you're in your pension, you can take money down and you can have a safe future.
Yes.
It's a completely intangible goal for them. They don't understand it. They can't see the reason. They don't get it. Mm-hmm. If you say to someone in a boardroom, "Oh, you should hire more people with disabilities, because eventually it might make you a bit more money," they go, "I don't get it."
No,
the fatigue comes from this kind of broad brush statement of we all must fix D&I. People think, "Oh, well, we've been trying to fix it for 10 years and we haven't fixed it." We have to talk about the next level down of which bits we're talking about. What's our goal? What's our objective? What are we actually trying to do? When can we take a breath and pat ourselves on the back and go, yeah, we've done well? And that's, data is one of the most important things, one of the most important weapons we can have in D&I. Weapon's a strong word, but I don't know. Kind of one of the most tools at our available to us. Yeah. Because you can see it change. Yeah. If you can link the diversity that you have in your staffing, or the diversity that you have in how you approach product development, or how you invest your funds, or how you move your money around, with a direct correlation to your organizational efficacy, process improvement, profits, staff retention, and you actually make that link and you directly do something here and you can see something change here, it's much more satisfying. Yeah. As you said, you can look back and you can say, well, 15, 20 years ago, I was the only person on the floor that looked like me. That's hindsight. Hindsight's a beautiful thing. But how do you tell someone now, if you do this, then something's going to change in 20 or 30 years? They just don't want to. We're all short-termists. We all like the buzz. We all like to feel like we've achieved something. And to your point, Tom, on people getting defensive, they go, well, I'm trying my best. I've done that. And there hasn't been we haven't solved it. We haven't fixed it. It's such an intangible, broad brush statement. Yeah. We must have more diversity. That for people who don't live it every day, or who don't feel it every day, it's really hard to get your head around. It's a complex topic, and you need steps. Tell me how to do it and I'll go and make some change. But just telling me that I need to be more diverse is really quite a vague statement.
I think it must be the difference between something that is kind of like bottom up, so to speak, within a company's culture, on sort of like top down. I think if it's something that is, you have a sort of a stagnant culture in a particular company that's resistant to change, like we were saying earlier, and then you sort of, on top of that, you say, okay, well, the way to do it is the tick box exercise. Okay, here's a PowerPoint on
here's our strategy.
Here's our strategy. Here's do this module on this, or maybe we'll get a speaker in to talk to you for half an hour or something. And I think that's where you get a kind of like, you get the eye rolls all the time. Yeah. Whereas I kind of think if you kind of, and I don't have an easy answer to this, I don't have easy answers to anything, unfortunately, but I suppose in the hiring process, if you are committed to the idea of a diverse and inclusive workforce from the bottom up, and you build teams and cultures with those values embedded, maybe even embedded unconsciously, you just you know the right type of people that will fit in with this culture you're trying to build, then I suppose there's less need for, I don't know, like pride flags here, or a kind of initiative.
Or it's organic.
It's organic. It's organic. It's not being pushed onto people, and it's when I suppose there's that perception of this is being pushed onto me. Then the barriers go up and the defensiveness goes up. And whereas I feel, I would put money marketing in this bracket. I think that there's never been any arguments within we have quite a diverse team, but there's never been any. It's never been an issue. It's just that's how we all are.
Yeah.
We understand and recognise the value of it. But how you get there in a culture where that is not the case, I suppose.
And the size of the organisation also really matters. I think you made a point there about people sort of eye rolling, because and we've got the opposite. We get the most engagement with our staff when we do things like raising money for the Albert Kennedy Trust. We raised loads of money, everybody engaged with it, everybody loved it. And there'll always be people who don't, and there'll always be people who don't want to get involved. But that's the same with every single thing. And I think applying something that will work in your system is very important. Don't, again, top down, blanket, here's a cookie cutter, I found this template online, we're just going to go and do it. Not going to work. Doesn't work with any change management. But listening to your teams and listening to what matters to them is really important, because I've worked in a previous company where we had a massive, massive technical department and a lot of mathematicians and a lot of people who just didn't like everybody coming into the office and having to socialize, and because they were quite introverted people. So actually they weren't saying they didn't like the D&I Pride event. They were saying, please don't make me come in and have to eat cupcakes. They weren't actually reacting to the content. They were saying, can we do something that's a bit more, a bit quieter, a bit more for me? And so me and some of my friends, we talk a lot about, so I'm bisexual, and I talk about, like, where are the teacup gays? Like, I actually don't want to go to Pride. I find it very overwhelming. I don't want the glitter and all of it. It's lovely, but I want to sit and have a cup of tea with other people who I can kind of have that with. So it's not actually about the kind of root cause if we want to do a D&I thing. It's about finding things that work for your organisation. And again, that kind of staging of doing this. Oh, look, we've measured that it's had a positive impact. Asking people afterwards, did you enjoy that? Because you'll get 3 people who send an email saying that was a complete waste of time, and I can't believe we spent company money on inviting so and so in to talk to us about this. But if you actually ask, you get the feedback. You'd be surprised by how many people say, I really liked it. It really matters to me that my company...
talking about Pride, I have to say, we've been supporting Pride we are a Brighton-based business. We've been supporting Pride for a decade. Big supporter. It's proper Christmas time for us in Brighton when Pride is happening. So, and the involvement there is amazing. I think on the reality is, to a question of fatigue, I think first of all, look, we always need to learn, right? We can't be, all right, this is the right solution, that's what it is. I think we need to be open to listen. Things that are not working, we should be able to adapt accordingly. So I think that we should recognize that there have been sort of areas where, frankly, some improvements have to be made. Then I think we should be open about that. The key, the way it works is when it becomes part of the DNA of the organization, the culture of the organization. It can never be a top-down initiative.
Right.
It has to be through listening, engaging, so bottom up, to the extent that it is not something separate that just sits there in a stovepipe. It's part of the culture of the organization. It's the way of living and working. That is when it really makes an impact, and that's what we see in the organization. And there are so many examples there. I mean, people talk about understanding the customer needs and responding to them. Now, in our organization, because we are biggest child trust fund provider, one of the things that nobody recognized is that almost there were 6 million children who got child trust fund. Of those, around 80,000 would be children with mental incapacity. Now, when the rules were set up, the legislation was such that the only way that the money could be accessed for those 80,000 people would be through a court of protection process, which is a hugely cumbersome process for something like £2,000. Now, this happened organically. Our own organization, our customer service staff, when they recognized this, they came up with a process to simplify this, which the rest of the industry followed. It wasn't a top-down driven process. It's just because when you're part of they understand the needs of the different customer segment. They understood the needs of, young adults with mental incapacity. And they came up with a solution, which nobody had to tell them that come up with the solution. They came up with the solution themselves, which then the rest of the industry followed as well. So that's an example of how you make it part of the values and the culture of the organization. And that's how it works.
That's such a good... that's cool. Very cool. And that, again, regulation or changes that come from an actual, we recognize there's a problem here, can we go and solve it, are always going to get more traction. And it's great that came from your team. I think what you're saying about linking it into culture is so important. It helps everybody. If you're putting in a policy that is a kind of flexible working policy that in your mind you're building in so that people with parental responsibilities are able to take an extra day here or there, or finish a little bit early once every however long, or go and care for their grandma in certain places, you are also helping people who want that for other reasons. You don't know what's going on in everybody's house. You don't know everybody's list of attributes or list of experiences or list, there are invisible things all around us. So again, if you badge something as a D&I initiative or D&I initiative, some people switch off because they go, well, I don't count. That's not for me. Whereas if you badge it as a cultural initiative, or you just say, look, we're just doing this because it's a good thing to do. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do. We're doing this because it's going to help you. It's going to help you, which is going to make you happier, which is going to make it all, we're all in it together. Bringing people together to feel like that fosters that inclusion and accessibility. And then people who might have previously been kind of grumpy about it think about moving companies, and they apply somewhere where that hasn't been a priority, and they think, I've taken it for granted for the last 5 or 10 years because I've worked for a place with all of these positive D&I policies that actually impact everyone and make everybody have a better work-life balance and workplace.
And I would assume that having, a culture like that will also mean, like you're saying, your customer service people were able to see this issue, address it. But the fact that even though they are maybe lower on the totem pole, I don't know if that's offensive to say, but they felt that they also had the voice where they could go and do that. Whereas I think some other organizations which don't have that kind of culture might not have felt the strength or the courage to be able to voice and be like, I think this is something that we should be doing. So I think having that culture is something that will open up dialogue, that will also then in turn help customers and help greater society. So
that's a nice.
I did say earlier I was talking to Tom and I said that we need to start practicing radical positivity, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Radical positivity, but not toxic positivity.
Not toxic positivity.
Toxic positivity.
Oh, it's a thing. It's like when you just pretend everything's fine. You're like, no, it's not.
That's a whole like podcast.
Yeah.
No, but I'm just trying to be in times of when it's very difficult, still trying to find, the silver lining, I guess.
Well, that's about those short, what have we done? What has recently got better? Yes, there's still big old mountain to climb. But if you look back, we've come a long way. And that's why Black History Month, International Women's Day, events that are there to celebrate can feel a bit depressing, a bit fatigued, a bit in times when things are changing. But it's when they're most important. Remember that 50 years ago, women couldn't do this. Remember that 20 years ago, this was still happening. You have to be reminded to keep us.
I always say that. I think I said it to my colleague once, Mamadou. We were talking about something, and I think he was like, "Oh, back in the day, it was so much better." And I was like, "No, we are historically at the best time in our lives. Like everyone, it's not the best for everyone, but it is much better now than it has been. So I get that some people like to look back and have rose-tinted glasses, but yeah, when you think like 50 years ago, this horrible thing was happening, or this group of people were not allowed to even say they existed, or something like that, then yeah, we are definitely moving in the right direction. I just think that maybe we're in a time period where it feels like some people feel that because other groups are being more focused on, they might feel like they're being erased, which is not the truth.
But I think it's because I'm in my mid-40s, and even in my own lifetime, you know, I mean, I think I first came to like political consciousness in sort of like the mid-90s. And I remember having a discussion about things like gay marriage in the mid-90s, and that was a fringe opinion, absolutely fringe opinion back in the mid-90s. Now it's completely mainstream and sort of like, you know, entrenched in law in dozens and dozens of countries. And I think the thing about sort of like change and progress, it might be a sort of like an upward line, but there are always going to be bumps along that line. And in the case of some of the backlash on diversity and inclusion, if you're living in one of those bumps, you can kind of think, oh my God, you know, everything that we work for is being unraveled. But actually, if you take the longer, broader sweep of history, you can say we've come a long way. But I suppose, I mean, just picking up the point you were making about sort of talking about, you know, if you talk about culture and things like that, rather than labeling it sort of a DEI, and that point, you know, people can kind of like get defensive. I suppose it is about sort of like trying to reframe those conversations and trying to say, look, just, you know, let's take a bit of a heat out of this conversation and just try and talk about what are we actually trying to achieve here and why we think this is a good thing and why it's positive for everything. And, you know, to try and get, you know, regain some of that sort of ground that is potentially being lost. I mean, you're talking about pride, you know, in the area that you live. You can always tell those places that really live and breathe that value against those kind of like companies that are naming no names that are using it as a kind of ideological garnish, you know, to make themselves
sell product.
Pink washing.
Absolutely. And
we've all seen them.
We've all seen them. And a lot and those are the kinds of companies, you know, with the Trump backlash, those are the kinds of companies that will just jump whatever way, whether.
I was going to bring up how Target has recently, I think the CEO stepped down because they were one of the bigger companies in the US that when Trump's administration were like, we're pulling all DI initiatives, they were the first to actually do that within their organization, which then in turn meant that consumers decided, well, I'm not going to spend my money there. And they've had a massive drop in sales. And now the CEO has stepped back. So I think there could be an argument that not having D&I, I think you said this earlier, Jim, will actually affect your business because you will be held back. Either the consumer will see you and say, you don't align with my morals and values, or you're not being innovative because you don't have a diverse workforce that might be able to say, hey, I saw this thing on TikTok, maybe we should add it. And that's my addition to everything that we do. That's why I said TikTok.
Hey, we should do it on TikTok.
Yeah.
I think recognizing that, I mean, 10 years ago, people would talk about minorities. And now we talk about excluded majorities. You know, actually recognizing that Target or anybody else who goes, oh, it doesn't matter, aren't registering that they've probably got a huge amount of shoppers, a huge amount of customers who identify as or fall into one of these margins, which is not a margin. We I say collective we here for every marginalised person. We aren't in the margins. There are loads of us. Actually, we've got the pink pound. We've got the purple pound. Is that the disabled? I think it must be a pound for every type. You've got the green pound. You've got the people who are setting up kind of sustainable focus initiatives, and they're getting a huge amount of traction because it matters to people. And listening to people is really important, and that's so. My job as a product person, product management. Quick 101 for anybody who doesn't know what it is essentially listening to customers translating that into business outcomes, trying to make sure that you then check that you've done the thing that you've done, go back to the customers, make sure it's still working. So essentially the kind of cycle, the glue between a lot of different departments to say, you want that, actually let's prioritize this because the customers also want it, or because it's going to get us the biggest ROI. So I've always hired product teams that are super diverse. And to your question earlier on kind of, have we experienced it, or have we had that? I've had people in my kind of leadership team alongside me joke about the fact that I only hire diverse people. It's not on purpose. I'm not actually going out of my way to hire all of these different people. But look, they don't all look the same.
This person.
Because the consumers of mass market products,
don't all look
financial advice and or insurance in my previous life, everybody needs it. Everybody needs that. So why would it not make sense for me to have a group of people who all think differently and can come at it from different perspectives? So when we're sat in a room saying, why is this product not working? We have people like your frontline people saying, well, because of this. Because this is obvious to me, but it's not obvious to you. And that is just not going to happen if you're sat in your kind of ivory tower at Target going, oh, I'm allowed to do this now. This is going to save me some money in the short term.
Yeah.
Let me stop spending that budget on it. Because they're not thinking about the consequences of their action.
And I think that thinking is so critical in product design. I'll call it the problems we have in society right now are called wicked problems, right? There's no optimal solution. You almost have to navigate and balance a number of variables there. And this is where listening is quite important. And listening also means being close to the customers. A piece of research that, again, it's done by the team, not sort of top down, that was done, was around the challenges that younger people face. And one of the pieces of research which was actually published and covered recently, was that 1 in 5 young people are currently living in unhappy relationships because they can't afford to move out. It's sort of insight like that we get, which then sort of we can translate into product and propositions. One of the big challenges in, if you look at the excluded majorities that you pointed out, is accessibility. They are the disenfranchised parts of the population who are either not sort of getting approached by financial providers for products and solutions, or they themselves think, it's not for me. And this is where the financial services industry has a bigger role to play. We see that as our role, in particular when it comes to accessibility, ensuring that we have lower entry points for people to come in and start saving with us. But those outcomes are only possible if our way of thinking is such that we can think like our consumer, we can think like those parts of society. And that happens through that diverse and inclusive workforce. The other thing, it's probably a statement of the obvious. In this day and age, to get the best out of the people, we need a happy workplace. Happiness is really an understated attribute. I think we need a lot of that in society, all right? And what we find that a happy workplace is an inclusive workplace. When you make people comfortable, they can be themselves, they can say what they want to say, they're respectful of each other. I think they're motivated, and they also perform better. And that happiness is quite important. That I think if you think about it this way, if all workplaces are happy workplaces, we would have a happy society. I think happiness is an issue in society right now.
And honestly, on that note, I think we should leave it there because, like I said, practicing radical positivity, and I feel like that's definitely in line with what I feel. But yeah, I think this conversation was amazing, and I think it's something that we will probably pick up at some point again. But thank you both, Jem, Rowan, for joining us, and Tom as well for being here with me. But yeah, we hope to see you in the next episode, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.